According to a new poll, 71% of Trump voters expect a civil war or some kind of major political and social upheaval. Around 40% of Joe Biden supporters feel the same. I don't know the total percentages for the general population because we don't have the actual number breakdown of this poll, but this is a new high. The poll was published in the Washington Examiner on January 8th. Now, why should we be talking about expectations of a civil war? The left, many on the left would tell you that by talking about it, that by me saying, look what happened, this is going to contribute to, lead to, or is a civil war, it is somehow making that happen. I think that's patently absurd, mostly because every single video I've done on it is to express that you don't want it. It would be a bad thing, and we should do everything we can to avoid it. Now, when the conflict doesn't occur, I remember just even a few weeks ago, I was getting inundated by Democrat leftist types saying, now we can see all your predictions were wrong. Everything you said was wrong. You were telling people this was going to happen and it didn't happen. And then the 6th happened. And now some people on the left are saying it's the worst attack on the U.S. since 9/11, which is absurd, but that's what they're saying. Glenn Greenwald noted that the left is using this essentially as their 9/11, basically to enact sweeping new laws and social restrictions and things like that. No. The reason we talk about it is so that you know what people are thinking according to a poll published in a major American newspaper. And we talk about it once again to say, you don't want this. The left shouldn't want this. The right shouldn't want this. But we're getting to a point where neither faction really cares. The left doesn't think it will happen in the sense that they think they have the control now. That as Michael Tracy put it, the left liberal monoculture is about to merge with the state. Well, let me read you his tweet. Michael Tracy says, the new corporate authoritarian liberal left monoculture is going to be absolutely ruthless. And in 12 days, it is merging with the state. This is only the beginning. Yes, Michael Tracy is absolutely correct. Particularly astute individual, I might add, because we've been quoting him quite a bit because he's kind of hitting the nail on the head with the hammer. Now, on the right, as we just learned earlier today, I did a segment, Amazon is banning Parler. As many conservatives, many of whom don't endorse what happened at the Capitol and are critical of it, many of them are seeing their access purged, their accounts removed. Following this, they're being backed into a corner. It is going to radicalize people who didn't want to be involved, and many of them will now get involved. Many on the right who have already been removed have been saying for some time, we've already lost everything. So what else is there? These are the people who are essentially walking us towards civil war. I can't blame people who are being oppressed and being, having their lives destroyed. And I can't blame people who are terrified of authoritarianism, but I can blame those who would advocate for authoritarianism under the guise of fighting against it, which is why typically I'm criticizing the left and telling them to stop before things go too far. They've gone too far. Because here's actually the important thing you need to know about this poll. The Washington Examiner published this on the 8th. The poll was taken before the 4th. That's right. The poll that said Civil War expectations reach new high was taken before the events at the Capitol. Now, I can only imagine following what happened at the Capitol, both sides are basically maxed out to a high degree, expecting some kind of civil war or whatever. And I'll just tell you this, simply by talking about it and telling you the poll exists is not in any way expecting or encouraging it to happen. But with the left, many on the left who want Joe Biden in power and want the reins of authority and want the power to remove their opponents, they don't want opposition. They don't want anyone talking about a potential for conflict. They want everyone to just agree with them. There's a really interesting speech going around from Arnold Schwarzenegger where he says that, he talks about post-World War II Austria, the reaction from broken men who were guilty and in pain from shrapnel and in pain in their emotions after losing this war. And he said it was bad. But he likened what happened in Germany to the Proud Boys. He literally invokes the Proud Boys. This kind of rhetoric is not going to make things better. It's going to make things worse. He was calling on Americans to come together regardless of party. But what these people don't understand is that they continue to spit in the face of the 74 or 75 million people who voted for Trump while telling them to join us. That doesn't work. That won't work. You can't insult someone and call Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley Goebbels like Joe Biden did, and then Arnold come out and say that it was essentially the Proud Boys, the equivalent of the Proud Boys on Kristallnacht, and then think these people will stand next to you in unity. So it's almost like they don't want it. And they don't want me pointing out what they're doing is wrong and is encouraging the violence. Don't ask me why. It's just the way it is. But it's going to expand from here. And I think we're going to start seeing things get worse, obviously. And people, look, too many people say it's pessimistic. Is it pessimistic to say this literally happened? Is it pessimistic to say police departments across the U.S. are probing their own members to see who took part in the Capitol riot? Brandon Straka of the Walk Away campaign had his entire organization removed from Facebook and everyone involved was banned. Like everyone, apparently. Some of these people were just contractors, I guess. I suppose the reason was he held a Walk Away event in D.C. And because of that, he was an organizer for what led to the storming of the Capitol, even though he certainly didn't. Well, there you go. They're now removing anybody who is associated. What comes next? There are reports that they're going to be probing departments to look for people who may be associated not just with the events at the Capitol, but with white supremacy. These are the political witch hunts that can get, well, if they continue to escalate, and I don't see reason why they would not, it becomes witch hunts. They'll say, we don't know for sure if this person was involved, but we definitely should get rid of them anyway. There's a musician. His name is, I believe, Ariel Pink, removed from his record label for simply being in D.C. to hear Trump speak. Not at the Capitol. Not. Josh Hawley lost his book with Simon & Schuster. This is the bits of escalation I've been warning about. I want to stress Michael Tracy's point about the authoritarian liberal left corporate monoculture merging with the state. And then I want to show you this story and read to you what's happening. The Examiner says, Civil War expectations reach new high, 71% of Trump supporters. Soul searching and lecturing following the election and Wednesday's Capitol protests and riots have done nothing to tamp down GOP outrage. According to a new survey, a record high 71% of Trump supporters believe the country is headed towards civil war. What's more, 40% of President-elect Joe Biden supporters agree. Trump has done little to cool feelings, today tweeting that he plans to stay in the fight after leaving office. And that's true. I think Trump has handled this poorly. But the problem is both sides, I believe, are handling this poorly. Quote, the 75 million great American patriots who voted for me, America first and make America great again, will have a giant voice long into the future. They will not be disrespected or treated unfairly in any way, shape, or form. The poll from the Frontier Center's Ear to the Ground, shared with secrets, is the latest to show the deep division in the nation and likely support Trump has. The question, do you believe our country may likely be headed to a civil war or other significant upheaval? And we can see Joe Biden, yes. Of the Joe Biden voters, 40% said yes. And Trump supporters, 71% said yes. Biden had the largest faction of those saying no. 31% of Biden supporters say no, we are not. But only 8% of Trump supporters said no, we are not. 29% of Biden supporters were unsure and 20% of Trump supporters were unsure. Trump supporters overwhelmingly think either it's going to happen or they're not sure if it will or it won't. Only a small percentage think it won't. The center's Ann Sorek-Siegel told us, the controversy over the disputed election outcome is crystallizing the view that a new civil war is coming. Trump supporters view this election not as an endpoint now, but as a phase line in a war that has already begun. She offered up other details from the findings when asked, who won the election technically? The responses were, if you believe civil war is coming, only 17% believe Biden won. 81% of those who believe civil war is coming think Trump won. 3% unsure. If you believe there will be no civil war, 55% of those who don't think a civil war is coming said Biden won. 25 Trump won and 14 unsure. And those unsure are split. 40% for Biden, 48% for Trump, and 12% unsure. Several other polls throughout the election showed rising concern of a potential civil war. This week's protests and riots on Capitol Hill and other state capitals suggests the polling is pretty accurate. Pretty accurate, the polling. The polling, let me just pull it up for you. It's from the 4th. And there's a really funny thing on Christmas cards. I don't know, January 4th, 2021. The poll was done well before. Now, to be fair, they say the Frontier Center Ear to the Ground surveyed 342 Americans to determine their Christmas card behavior. They say people, going on and, peacetime ritual, etc. And they go on to mention those who believe in some kind of civil war. It's a small sample size. They haven't released their methodology, so maybe it's bunk. But I do think it's still relevant, at least in the sense that major newspapers are talking about it. The rhetoric on social media is beginning to escalate, and it's getting downright scary. Let me show you this. People for Bernie. I mentioned this earlier in the day. They said you're either Antifa or pro-fascism. There is no middle ground. The question today isn't which side are you on. That question has already been answered. We know who sided with fascism. Don't let them escape it. We have this from the Lincoln Project saying, at Project Lincoln, we are constructing a database of Trump officials and staff that will detail their roles in the Trump administration and track where they are now. No personal info, only professional. But they will be held accountable and not allowed to pretend they were not involved. In the speech from Arnold, he said we must hold those who made this happen accountable. What does that mean? Who is that? What kind of language is that? Hold them accountable. I agree. What about those on the left who made this happen? Should we hold Pelosi accountable when she went to the Joint Chiefs of Staff and asked them to usurp command? What the Joint Chiefs, the Pentagon, said would amount to a military coup. Will there be accountability for her? Will there be accountability for Kamala Harris, who solicited donations to those for those who were rioting across the country and destroying businesses? Will there be any accountability for those who enabled the Chaz, which resulted in many dead as a group of far-left extremists tried to seize territory in American City? There won't be. And Arnold won't be calling for it either. And therein lies the deep-seated problem we have in this country. The left won't admit fault while demanding the right does. And the right has no problem saying that Lin Wood is crazy and then calling out the left. Elements of the fringe right and the moderate right are actually split. Elements of the far left and the neo-lib, corporate left are not. Or I should say, the centers of power lie in the woke cultist left. The centers of power on the right do not lie in the fringe Lin Wood type Q right. They don't. Right now, you have people like Mike Cernovich, one of the most prominent Trump supporters in this period, who really did help Trump get elected, I don't want to say disavowing, but basically criticizing all of these crazy conspiracy theorists and people like Lin Wood, saying he feels bad for the people who still believe Trump is somehow going to win even after all of this. No, it's over. Trump conceded. But there are people who just believe it. They just believe crazy things about satellites and Q and the plan and all this nonsense that's never come true. When you have prominent, independent personalities like Cernovich, not even a mainstream Republican, saying it ended a long time ago, you can see the centers of power don't lie with the fringe Lin Wood types. I'll tell you, I'm surprised to see the fact that Lin Wood got so many retweets and so much support before he was banned, because a lot of people do believe it. But when you look at the left, you can see that Arnold never called out the extremism. Maybe that's unfair. He certainly did, and many others call it the violence. But to this extent, of course not. Did the media call out any of this violence to this extent? Absolutely not. On the contrary, they defended it to a certain degree. Look, it'd be one thing if Cuomo came out and said all of this violence must stop during the Black Lives Matter riots. Instead, he said, who said protests need to be polite or peaceful? And it was shockingly brazen. And that's the narrative they took. Why? Because the centers of power do lie with the insurrectionist and woke left. Now, they'll deny it because they'll say, look, Joe Biden's president. Yes, but Joe Biden having a seat in the Oval Office is not the base of all power. They claimed that Donald Trump was in power simply by being president. But we know that's not true. We know that all the cultural institutions were substantially more powerful than Trump. We know that Donald Trump couldn't get his own administration to do things, and that Trump wasn't even smart enough to get on an alternative social platform. If Trump got on Parler early on, it would have made it very, very difficult for these big tech companies to remove Parler. But Trump did not do it. He didn't do it. None of these Republicans, Trump included, were smart enough to see the writing on the wall. No matter how much I said. We had a podcast, Joe Rogan and I, 2 years ago. More, was it 3 years ago now? How long ago was that? Wow. Almost 3 years ago. Isn't that crazy? Was it 3 years ago? I don't even remember when it was. Was it 2 years ago? 2019 or 2018? I think it was 2019. I can't remember. I think it was 2019. Okay, 2 years ago. But we talked about this. I warned about this. I said to Jack, if you keep doing this, you will lead us to a very dark place. He didn't care. Neither did Vijay Gadde. They didn't care. And now here we are. When it comes to crimes committed, the people who deserve the blame are the people who committed the actions. The people who stormed through the doors of the Capitol and the people who bashed that cop over the head. They're the ones who should deserve full accountability and responsibility for what they have done. Will they? I don't think so. Well, not in certain circumstances, but at least as it goes with the federal government. What we're seeing now is sweeping attacks on anyone involved, period, and a dramatic escalation. But I just see this going to a dark place. When you see the likes of Project Lincoln saying, the Lincoln Project, that they're going to be amassing names. So it doesn't matter what the rhetoric is or what you think is right. And that's ultimately what this comes down to. The actions that, we see, the people who took them are the responsible parties. But both tribes don't care. And it's the same as we see with the police, same we see with Antifa. And I've criticized Antifa and the far leftists ever since Occupy. When their extremists would smash windows and hurt people, they'd say, we'll take care of it. When there were a series of rapes inside Occupy Wall Street's camp at Zuccotti, they said, don't tell the police, we will take care of it. And did they? No. They just put up some flyers saying, don't let these people back in. They did not take care of it. When the police, during Occupy, wrongfully arrested a photographer, was there accountability for the officer who lied under oath? None. A police officer I filmed lied under oath about an arrest and got away with it. No accountability within the system, none without, and so legitimacy is out the window. Regular people view it as legitimate because they're not paying attention. But once people start to realize that they're not going to be getting any accountability, then the system collapses. We start to see people on the left make assumptions about all police encounters, thinking that every single instance of a police shooting is some kind of evil, craven or depraven act that they must be held accountable for. Now, you can argue there should be some accountability for someone who's dumb. A scared cop who shoots somebody in panic should probably lose their weapon and maybe be put on desk duty. But if you're talking about somebody who approaches a vehicle and sees someone reach down into their belt and they say stop and the person doesn't and they panic, it's very different from just executing someone. There are challenges. I think there should be accountability there. The left wants first-degree murder charges in these circumstances, but it doesn't make sense. On the right, you see complaints that the media isn't held accountable for advocating for violence. That's right, because they hold the cultural institutions, and that means they have that power to advocate for these things. A wave of statements about punching Nazis led to a dramatic escalation from these groups who feel like they've been crushed and marginalized and refuse to back down. When people feel their existence is being threatened, when you back a scared animal into a corner, it will choose to fight. Fight or flight. And if they have no choice, if flight is destroyed, they choose fight. So take a look at what's going on right now. As Twitter purges the right, the opportunity for flight is being crushed. As everybody fled, these big tech companies and these far leftists chased after them to make sure no matter what you do, no matter where you go, they will stomp the boot on your neck. Lick it, or else, they say. The left that was once fighting and challenging against corporate censorship at Occupy Wall Street is now supporting it wholeheartedly. I firmly believe the right would do the same if they controlled the cultural institutions. We saw it in previous decades. So it's not about necessarily which tribe is in the right. It's about which tribe is currently doing the wrong thing. And that's the left. And they're going to encourage violence. Mike Pence is not sure what he'll do. He has not ruled out using the 25th Amendment, but fears Trump will do something to jeopardize national security if he does. As it's revealed, VP sheltered in bunker with family and heard MAGA mob chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." Trump plans defiant final week as many Democrats urge his ouster. Trump is confident Pence and members of his cabinet will not attempt to remove him. Trump only has 10 more days. Not even that. The inauguration is the 20th, so about 9 days to actually do anything. I think it's kind of scary that Trump could go off the rails. Apparently, he's been angry and yelling, to aides and things like that. He should never have fired Brad Parscale. That was a massive error. Brad Parscale, I think, also made a major mistake with that failed rally that took place in, I think it was Omaha, or was it Tulsa? I think it was Tulsa. I don't know, one of those two. A lot of mistakes have been made by Trump. And you can see that he was never prepared for this. There are some things that Trump did that I thought were really good. And I'll clarify a statement I made the other day because some people took issue with it. When I said something to the effect of my support for Trump went so far as he was trying to remove troops from the Middle East, what I meant to say was the biggest thing he had done was removing troops from the Middle East, or trying to, and that was serious. Not to pretend like there was other things that like I was disavowing or pretending like I never supported other things from him. No, absolutely. There are a handful of things Trump did, like his executive order on critical race theory. I can't speak too much about what he did in terms of economic policy other than the economy was doing really, really well. And I think his desperate attempts to pull troops out of the Middle East were something worth supporting. So I was definitely in favor of that. No new wars as well. And those were the big issues. There were many others who felt similarly. But I've never been a MAGA hat wearing Trump flag waving individual like, many people were. But I absolutely voted for the man, and I absolutely stand by it. As of now, looking at Trump's reaction to the 6 is, vomitous. I thought it was awful. I thought it was just absolutely awful. He should have immediately come out and said stop and no. And he should have done more to make sure something like this didn't happen. Nonviolent civil disobedience is acceptable. What we saw at the Capitol was unacceptable. I wish we could get a president who would stop what's going on in these foreign wars and this empire. And it's fascinating to me now that those on the left who would claim to be anti-imperialist are lining up in lockstep behind Joe Biden. Well, we'll see how this goes. And it'll go almost exactly as we saw during the Obama years. The prosecution of whistleblowers and journalists, the expansion of federal powers and security powers. But I can say I'm glad to see many on the left, many populist leftists are starting to reject the idea of new domestic terror laws. Hopefully they realize what that will mean for them. As Ocasio-Cortez cheered on the removal of Trump, I made one point very clear. I think it's great that corporations are starting to purge these people because that means we can count on them getting rid of Bernie Sanders and Ocasio-Cortez next. And I think we can all appreciate that, right? Silly populists. That was the joke. I more than welcome AOC to use her platform to speak her mind, as well as Bernie Sanders. In fact, there's a lot of things I support Bernie Sanders on, but I just question his integrity. At this point, I question Trump's integrity quite well. I'll put it this way. I've actually had more favorability for Bernie than for Trump for a long time, but actions speak louder than words. I think Bernie has said some things, notably about white people on the stage of the debates, I did not like. And Bernie's embrace of woke culture and his weakness was pathetic. He also started supporting things that I thought were absurd. But in terms of character, it was okay. Trump's character is garbage. It's always been garbage. And like the man at the airport story I've told before said to me, that he would never invite Trump to his house for dinner, but the economy was doing really, really well. And so that's what they supported. They tried to claim Trump was a fascist dictator. No, if anything, Trump was a bumbling, government servant. I'll put it that way. He didn't know how to use government. He didn't know what was going on. He had some strong ideas. And at least we didn't see an expansion of war. We didn't see new wars. We saw a little bit expansion, drone strikes, and that was a bad thing, which is why in the first few years I did not support him. I criticized him. But in the last couple of years, these historic peace agreements, we must not forget, were amazing. Now the media is seeking to destroy what's left of the Trump legacy, saying he will go down in history as the worst president in American history. And that is factually not true. Well, as so long as the media takes control of everything, it is true. If there really is some kind of civil war and then the right ends up winning, then Trump will be the greatest. And then in the end, if, the left wins, then Trump will be the worst. But how can you claim that just because Trump has a tantrum or that he whines or that he doesn't do enough, that his historic peace agreements should be thrown into the gutter, that his attempts to withdraw troops should be thrown in the gutter? It doesn't work that way. There's nuance to this world. Trump's peace agreements were one of the biggest things that I supported. And it's amazing that even up until now in what's supposed to be a lame duck session, there have been tremendous strides. But they don't care. What's happening now is tribalism. And that's what's scary. If you can't admit that Trump's peace agreements were good and that his attempt to withdraw the troops was good, even though many of the things he did was bad and his character was awful, then I don't think you deserve to be in, I shouldn't say that. I should say, I don't think I should take your word. I don't think I should listen. I don't think I should value your opinions. The reality is you've got people on the right saying Trump is the best, period. People on the left saying Trump is the worst, period. Many people on the left believing that Trump is and always will have been an agent of Russia. And then people on the right thinking that you got to trust the plan because Trump's got to ace up his sleeve. The reality is Trump is not the best. He's not the worst. I think that in terms of what I valued, I refer to him as the best president, at least of my life, because he didn't start any new wars and because he tried getting our troops out of the Middle East, which was a disgusting mess. And for that reason, he was one of the best, plus the booming economy. For a variety of reasons, he's pretty bad. And that's why I often say Trump's bad, but he's not that bad. Ever since he started making these peace agreements and working on getting troop withdrawal, I said he's actually pretty okay in some of these areas. Far from perfect, far from the worst. Everybody is going to have their opinions, and that's fine. But I'll tell you where we're going right now is worrisome, and I find it to be particularly dangerous because the left doesn't care about history and facts. They care about their perspective and worldview, and it's twisted and tormented. You've got people like Lin Wood who say the same thing. But take a look at the likes of, say, Cernovich or Will Chamberlain, prominent conservatives, trying to return things to normalcy and have a real conversation. The problem is this conservative base, which is the largest, don't have are ignored, I suppose, by the media. The media wants to use the fringest element of the right to destroy all on the right. And the seats of power on the left lie with the woke cultists. So you can see where we're heading. And I don't think there's a path out. That's my opinion. And I don't think it's pessimism. I think it's realism. I think you want to go back to all those people who laughed and mocked me and said, Tim's stupid for thinking something like this could happen. And then it literally happens and they say, it's your fault for saying it could happen. Yes, sure. So is the podcast, It Could Happen Here. So is the Atlantic and the New York Mag. So is Washington Examiner. So is the Frontier Center for Ears on the Ground. Every single one of these organizations that said the exact same thing was coming. It's all their fault, too. No, the reality is anybody who would try and do this, it's tribalism. They don't like you. They don't want conflict, and they want everyone to feel like you have been crushed, you will be crushed, and there is no fighting back. I certainly think it's going to get dark in this country because, as Michael Tracy said, which I'll reiterate, the corporate neoliberal authoritarian monoculture is merging with the state. Call it what you want. This is only the beginning, and it's going to get worse. So do what you got to do. I'll leave it there. I will not have a segment coming up at 4 p.m. on my main channel because I'm going to chill for the rest of the day and probably wind things down to a certain capacity with a heavier focus on the Timcast IRL podcast. So subscribe over at youtube.com/TimcastIRL, and we will see how things develop. But these next 10 days are going to be particularly worrisome. And then I think even after that, it's going to get worrisome too because no one will back down. I'll see you all tomorrow at 10 a.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out.